Easiest way to get set up and running with PyGame Zero is by downloading the Mu editor. Now, I think we've all done that, so I'm just going to do a search for Mu. If you're on a school machine, it's possible you have an older version and the newer version. One would say Mu New. You might as well choose the newer one, although both will work. When I open up the Mu editor, the first time you open it, it could actually take up to 2 minutes for it to load. Mine hopefully will be a little bit faster. The very first time you open it, there will be options for which type of Python you want to use. We are going to go with the PyGame Zero. And I'm going to bring my version over. This is someone else's code. Normally, it would come up with the following. And if it doesn't, then what you're going to do is you're going to go to mode. And there are some various versions. We have microbits, little controllers here that we can play with later. CircuitPython are round controllers. Lego MicroPython, I've not used that. But anyways, we're going to go with the PyGame Zero. You can also just do plain old Python. But we're going to go with PyGame Zero. And I'll say OK. I'm going to say, sorry, maybe I have to say new first. New. Okay, so I guess when I did new, we were in PyGame Zero mode. Now, the key thing here is that PyGame Zero is built upon a larger library called PyGame, and the Mu editor has implemented it, takes out some of the complications involved. So it's a great intro to graphical gaming things. So the library has built-in interactions. So, for example, it determines when objects touch or collide. That's a feature that's nice to be able to say, hey, have these objects collided? If so, then do something else. Otherwise, we have to build in, figure out what the x-coordinate is of one object, xy coordinate of one object, xy of another coordinate, how big this object is, and find out whether whether the size of that object, because it's not just the center of it, but whether they touch or collide. So the first thing we need to do is PyGame Zero wants to know where its media is, where the image is, audio, and it takes that based upon where the file is saved. So and by default, the system may be trying to look in a certain location. If you start coding and then save after the fact, you might run into complications. So the best thing to do is to save your file immediately. So I've said new, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save. And I always recommend having a brand new folder for every game that you do, so that you could then later take that folder and move it to another location if you want to. You could put it up, for example, putting it up in your OneCloud. If you put it up in OneDrive, then you will have access to it from any computer you go to, including from home. So I'm going to go into OneDrive. I probably have a computer folder, computer science, and I'll just make a folder here. Folder. I'm going to call this PyGame. My game. Yeah. So I actually don't want to call it PyGame. Not a good idea to call that PyGame because it's importing the PyGame library, and there might be confusion between the actual PyGame library that someone wrote and your folder called PyGame. So I'm going to call it Game 1. That's my folder, and now I'm going to come in here and call it. This is going to be a fox collecting fox and coin. I'll call it. And naming conventions here don't matter whether you use spaces or not. That's I don't recommend spaces, but for now it doesn't really matter. All right, so now my program is saved. If I choose if I take a look at my images, same would be true for sounds and music, but images is what we're going to start with. What this should do is it should automatically create a folder inside of the first game folder beside the. Let me show you that. If I go to my OneDrive. Computer Science, Game 1. You'll see that there's nothing inside of that. I'm going to go back. I'm going to now click on the Images folder. And we'll see that we're in Game 1 Images. And so now when I go back to what it's just done, it's created this folder called Images. So that's important. So that's where we're going to need to include any sort of content. The content that we're going to use is contained inside, it's on D2L, just on the main page of the posts. And I've got that. I downloaded it a few days ago. I think it's called Fox and Coin. Got too many. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this images folder. Do I only have one folder there? Oh, it's over, it's over on my other screen. So I'm just going to try to find. All right, so here are my two folders. So I'm putting them, I opened up the images folder that's down here. That's inside of my game one. And I'm going to put my two images there. Oh, Control Z, I should copy those images. Control copy, Control paste. All right, so now I'm able to start running my program. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define the width and height of my screen. So I'm going to go, and these are capitalized because they are constants. So I'm going to go with a width of 800 and a height of 600. Okay, so those are constant values. And just a quick way to run, even before I do that, it should just open up a screen. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to play an awful lot. We should say, welcome to the PyGame community, and then it should open a black window, which will now be those dimensions. So I think those are the right dimensions. To confirm that's working, I'll run it again, just make one brief change. I couldn't really tell if those were, yeah, we can see it's getting a lot wider. So we're going to go with this 600 by 800. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to bring that fox onto the screen or onto the stage. So if I think about it as a stage, I give directions to my actors. That's what's happening. We're going to create a variable called fox. So I no longer want capital letters. They all have to be lowercase. And sorry, it's an actor. And these objects take a capitalized word, just like in CMU library, CMU graphics when we were using rectangles, circles, they're capitalized letters. They're slightly different than functions. And I know that because of the way whether they're capitalized or lowercase. So my actor, we can see there's various different things I can do with an actor. I can grab the image. If I want, I can set its position. By default, the position is none. I can anchor it to something else. So if something else moves, then that moves as well. And I'm not sure what the quarks is. That's not important for now. So my actor is going to be called, it's called Fox, right? There it is there. So I can either say fox.png or I can just say Fox. And for now, I won't bother changing the position. I'll just leave it in the center of the screen. So now that I've got a fox, if I run my program, nothing happens, but at least I don't get an error. I run all the time, and if I don't get an error, then I'm feeling already successful. So the key thing is that we've created this variable, but we haven't told anything to do with that variable. So I'm going to call a function called draw. And built into the game logic of PyGame Zero is this system whereby it knows if there's been a change in the system, it knows to go back and draw something, whatever it calls a draw command. Sorry, I have to define draw. And so this is a function. It's lowercase, and it's the computer knows to look for a draw function if we create one. So I'm going to define draw, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Fox, and I'm going to tell it to draw itself. And now if I run the program, we get a fox in the top left-hand corner. Now, remember that we didn't place a position. If I wanted to, I could also put it in a position. If I wanted it at the center of the stage, that would be halfway through, 400 by 600. And so this second thing that I can add is in brackets. The position is an XY coordinate, so it's got to be inside of brackets here, 400 by 600. If I try that, it didn't do what I thought it would do. X, oh, 400 by 300. It's down at the bottom. 400 by 300. It's going to be half of the height. And you can see, look, I make mistakes all the time, so don't be don't be surprised when you make lots of mistakes. So perfect. Now that I've got that working, what I can also do is I can have a feature that this has only been called once. Draw is only happening. And what I want to do is I want the computer to be checking more frequently for actions. And so there's a built-in feature called update, and the system will check it 60 times a second by default. So whatever I do inside of my update, define update. All right, so this I'm going to put down here. Should be doing this. Will be called automatically whenever the screen needs to be drawn. Right? That's built in by game logic. Called by default 60 times a second. Okay, so it doesn't, we can change how often that happens, but by default it's 60 times a second. So as a quick test, I'm going to just create a variable, x equals 0. I'm going to print x. So I'm going to define x as a global variable that I'm allowed to change within a function, and I'm going to say x, and I'm going to say x plus x equals x plus 1. So every time update is called, it's going to be incremented by 1. And if I run this, you can see that the numbers are going up like crazy. That's 60 times a second. But of course, I don't actually want to. X, I was just demonstrating how that works. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be checking for keyboard actions. So this is where a lot of things, where you need to be checking a lot of things, it's going to be inside of this update feature. So most of your code is going to be indented underneath this update. So I'm going to use the keyboard. So built in is a method for the keyboard. There's keyboard dot, and I'm going to look for keyboard dot down. So this down refers to the down arrow, and you can do a search on the docs for keyboard features. In fact, if I do a, let me pull up. I think I already have it open there. Computer is struggling. So I'm PyGame Zero read the docs.io. You do a search for PyGame Zero read the docs. I'm going to look for keyboard. The keyboard. Keyboard.a. So we can see keyboard.down, or left is the left arrow key, and then you got all the various letters as well. I'm going to use my 4 arrow keys. And so if the keyboard is down, then what I'm going to want is I'm going to want my fox to move down. So I'm going to say fox.x. So the fox has an x and a y coordinate, so I can change those. So I'm going to say fox.x is equal to fox. Down would be y. Fox.y. Fox.y is equal to fox.y. So the dot x would be the x coordinate, the dot y would be the y coordinate, and I'm going to increase that. That down would be -1. And if I run that, I'm hitting my down arrow and notice that it's going up. So 2 things wrong. Clearly our coordinate system is not the way math has built up our graphing system. The reason for that is that originally graphics they weren't really graphics, they're only letters, and so you could only start typing the top left of the screen, and so that was 0, 0. Going across to the right was positive, and then going down would be the next line. So that's line 0, just like here, line 1, line 2, line 3. That's how computers were generated. So a lot of graphics programs have going down as a positive number. So in fact, I would want to add 1 to this. Add 1, and now when I run it, and I hit my down arrow, you see that I'm going in the correct direction. But of course, what's just happened is I've changed the position of my fox, and so the computer knows to automatically call my draw function, so it draws a fox. The issue is that the fox, it didn't erase the original fox that was there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I draw my fox, I'm going to take the screen function, and I'm going to clear it. I'm going to call. So these are methods. When we're doing something to one, we call this an object. This method has a bracket at the end. So if I try running that, now I hit my down arrow, my object is working. Obviously, I can change the speed of that with a +1 or +5. Now I go down faster. So this is a property. It describes something. This is an action. I'm clearing, I'm drawing. It's a verb. I'm doing something. It's an action thing. The position X, Y, and that describes where something is. If I'm describing the color, that would be fox.color. I don't need the brackets. When there's an action, I need those brackets because we're doing something to the thing versus here it's changing a value of it. So from here, what I'm going to ask you to do is see if you can get your fox to move around the screen. I'm going to put challenges up at the top. Use this sample code. Allow fox to move in all directions. 2. Can you generate a second object, like the coin, and have it appear at a random location? 3. Fox goes off screen. Screen to right, reappear on left. Okay, think about how that would be done. Use if fox.x is greater than fox.x greater than 800 or greater than width. Right? What do you have to do? You have to reset. You have to set fox.x to some other value. Greater than some value. Done. Random. Okay, so those are the challenges that I want you to try to do with this sample code. And then the next video, we'll kind of take it from there to see what the next steps would be. So I will post this video and post this sample code if you needed it, but hopefully you just watch the video and run through the information and code along as I go.